And this is a great topic, which I'd love to continue on, but I also want to get to the topic of sustainable agriculture, which is another one of the 15 challenges.
Right.
Now, you're the co-founder of a company called General Hydroponics.
That's correct.
What's going on in the world of sustainable agriculture right now?
Well, and thank you for the opportunity. This is a paper I actually wrote a little while ago, just to read you the title. It's Water, How Can Everyone Have Sufficient Clean Water Without Conflict? And I sort of go into a very brief synopsis. This was actually for the State of the Future 2011 book that we published.
So the Millennium Project puts out a report like that every year?
Yeah, a series of reports, and all kinds of people from all over the world actually participate. Now it's just Brock and I both participate and submit these kinds of ideas. So I've been at this for a long time, even though my background came out of lasers and optics and nanomaterials and electronics and all these other things, a lot of which was military and DARPA.
Well, several decades ago, there was something called the Green Revolution to increase crop yields in underdeveloped countries. I gather we're moving further along.
Much further. And so the point I was hoping to get at was, even though up until just a few years ago I was, very much involved in Silicon Valley investors and combining with new electronics and other kinds of materials, I really had this sort of passion about, could we reorient these same breakthroughs in nanostructured materials and electronics and sensors and et cetera, but apply it to botany or to farming.
So you're applying nanotechnology to biotechnology.
In a sense, but in a very positive way. And this probably sounds scary to some, but here's where I'm going with this. First of all, I'm going to describe hydroponics. Hydroponics means growing without the use of soil. And so what that provides you is a way to have like this room could actually produce as much biomass as a farm 10 times the size if it was done correctly. But much more importantly, you use much less water because the water is constantly recirculated. And by carefully controlling the exact ratios of different nutrients and the pH and other factors, you can, almost like with the fine-tuning of a dial, you can tell exactly, and I mean doing exactly, what nutrient values are going to come out of the things you're trying to grow, whether it's a type of root or a fruit or a leafy vegetable, and you can have all different things sort of mixed together in the same amount of space. The advantage is that now you don't have to rely on large-scale monocrop farming. You can bring farming down to sort of almost like microeconomics meets farming, kind of in a way of modeling this concept.
I understand that we have a few slides which illustrate your work. Can we see the first slide, please? Okay, so what are we looking at here?
This is just one of the major greenhouses. We actually have several sites, but this is our site up in Sebastopol. And we've done a lot of work up there for many, many years. I actually was not involved with the company for some time. I was really working in nanomaterials and photonics and electronic systems and so forth, but went back recently and kind of picked up where I left off. And so we have a laboratory there. I mean, we grow things and we test out different nutrient systems.
And what are we looking at here?
Okay, so this is actually one of our, we call it the hexapod. And we work with UC Davis, of course, which is nearby. And so we have, our whole idea is to have these interchangeable component systems so that you can have different kinds of crops growing in the same physical space. You can have seedlings that grow at different rates. You can have different kinds of plants. And the whole idea is to come up with solution sets that can be adapted to wherever you might happen to be in a different part of the world, maybe where the quality of water is different, or a certain range of crops are more advantageous to a particular situation.
Let's see the next slide.
Okay, this is just an example of how...
It looks like there's wires going to those plants.
Well, it's holding them up. It's the whole idea is the amount of biomass. Notice how small the containers are versus the size of biomass. It's kind of astonishing. People walk in and they don't believe what they're looking at. It doesn't make it, like, there's a root ball this big, but it's this plant that's 10 feet tall and it weighs 30 pounds. How is that possible? And the reason is because the plants are not spending a lot of effort and energy searching for nutrients in the soil. It's almost like intravenous feeding. The solution is brought right to them. So the energy is not put in root development, it's put into plant development.
And I think the next and final slide illustrates that a little bit.
And there it is. This is a classic shot. There's Larry Brook, who actually is the other co-founder. This goes back a number of years. But we have gone way beyond this. This was kind of an earlier version. If you notice these rectangular tubes with the holes, and they have the little mounts, they're cocoa fiber mounts actually that go inside. We have quite a variety of all different kinds of interchangeable systems. I mean, we're just going through various different hardware platforms.
Is there any kind of theoretical limit as to how much food you can produce in a given area? Is there some gating factor?
There are gating factors, and this is one of the things that really gets me excited. That's kind of why plunge back into this because I see here in this country, especially in like Detroit and some other areas, but also just elsewhere in the world, you have cities filled with empty buildings. You have parking lots. You've got roofs of apartment houses, this kind of thing. I see farmland. And people used to laugh at this idea 10 years ago. They're not laughing now. It's kind of interesting. In fact, to maybe look at the economic side, there's a bunch of different journals. There's Agribusiness Weekly and so forth. And one of the articles that really kind of leaped off the page was there was actually an analysis of the amount of money spent on what's called microfarm technology or applications. Back in 2005, it was under $500 million. It was about $400 million total expenditures in the microfarming world. As of fiscal year 2012, that changed to $11.2 billion.
Is it possible? Is it possible for an apartment dweller to grow all of his own food in his apartment?
I think it's quite possible for a building to grow a variety of crops that everybody could benefit from. And that's the kind of model I think makes the most sense. Rather than having one person grow one thing, it's really more like a collective concept.
And there's some other economic concepts that are being balanced when we look at these concepts. One is, as we look at the growth of the population over the next few decades, we see not only projections for big population growth, going to 9 billion people by 2050 in the world, but also a lot of that growth, most of that growth, will be in urban areas. So there's a big question about how to get food from farmland to those people, and to what extent the economic cost of that can be offset by actually growing at least a certain percentage of the food in the cities themselves. And whether that's more energy efficient, makes use of real estate in a different way, makes use of water in a different way. So those things are certainly driving some of this interest now as well, as opposed to when the population was more spread out across.
And there's a concept called vertical farming. There's even some books called vertical farming. Should have brought one along, I'm sorry I didn't. But 5 years ago, this was kind of like an interesting concept. Now it's like people are actually doing this literally in Italy, France, Korea, Japan, certain parts of the United States. I mean, there's actual money being spent on can we turn this building into an actual farm. And what's interesting is the amount of stuff that's produced is not only larger than in a traditional open field farm, but it's actually much higher quality. And if I can tie just a couple of threads together, since after all we do look at problems in a holographic concept, here's maybe an example. If you look at the cost of healthcare, if you look at the number one downward driver of most of the major economies of the world is the cost of healthcare. It's the top list.
I'm afraid we're going to have to stop right there because I've just gotten the signal we're out of time. I'd like to thank my two guests, Brock Hinsman, Charles Wasserman from the Millennium Project, excuse me. Thank you for watching. Visit our website, www.futuretalk.net. For Future Talk, I'm Marty Wasserman. See you next time.